Our story began long ago. The only surviving species of the Homo genus, Homo sapiens. But how did the modern human rise to global dominance through the mechanism of civilization? Our story begins in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia in 4000 BCE, nestled between the great Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the Sumerian city of Uruk. Instead of relying on hunting and gathering like our ancestors, the people of Uruk developed methods to harvest grains, such as wheat and barley. However, transforming these grains into edible food required immense labor. They first used an invention called the hand mill, consisting of 2 stones. By crushing the grains between them, they collected the flour in a container for future use. This marked the beginning of something extraordinary. This arduous and complex process was the earliest example of agriculture in our modern world. Humanity no longer depended solely on hunting animals or gathering fruits. Instead, we could create our own food supply. This allowed Uruk to grow into a city of over 50,000 people. Yet this shift had physical consequences for humans. The average height of men decreased dramatically, from 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 3 inches, while women shrank from 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 9 inches. 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 0 inches. Humans were no longer the physically superior, athletic beings of the past. We became smaller, less imposing, and less robust. This marked a fundamental change in what it meant to be human. By the early 3000 BCE, according to legend, King Gilgamesh began his rule over Sumer. However, by the end of 3000 BCE, the Akkadians had overthrown the Sumerians. Sargon the Great seized power and conquered all of Sumer. Meanwhile, a new civilization was emerging in the Indus Valley, in present-day Pakistan. The Indus Valley civilization, 3300 to 1300 BCE, became renowned for its advanced sanitation systems. Toilets with seats and slides connected to underground sewage networks carried waste away from homes, preventing the spread of disease. Waste was treated and disposed of outside city limits, maintaining both hygiene and public health. In contrast, in ancient Egypt, the focus was more on building the pyramids than on fundamental sanitation. This was due to the Egyptian belief that when a pharaoh died, their soul continued to live in the afterlife, ruling eternally. Inside the pyramids, the pharaoh's body was carefully mummified to preserve its physical form and ensure the soul's journey. The pyramids were also filled with offerings and treasures to provide the pharaoh with the resources needed in the afterlife. Each pharaoh sought immortality and success in the afterlife, as well as eternal worship. This desire made pyramid construction a top priority for Egyptian rulers, ensuring their legacy would endure forever. The story begins with Pharaoh Djoser, 2667 to 2648 BCE, who built the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. He was followed by Sneferu, 2613 to 2595 BCE, who constructed several pyramids, including the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid. Next came Khufu, 2589 to 2566 BCE, who built the famous Great Pyramid of Giza, a massive undertaking that required 20 years of intensive labor, a feat that continues to amaze the world today. After Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure built the second and third pyramids of Giza, with the third slightly smaller than the second. Meanwhile, in China around 2100 BCE, the first Chinese dynasty emerged. Like the people of Mesopotamia, the Chinese relied heavily on agriculture, producing rice, wheat, and barley among other crops. However, according to legend, the Yellow River flooded, destroying crops and causing widespread famine and suffering. Yet hope arrived with Yu the Great, who was determined to solve this problem. He spent years traveling along the Yellow River, devising ways to control the water flow by building dams and channels. After 13 years of relentless work, the floods no longer devastated the land. The people celebrated, welcoming Yu as a savior. This marked the beginning of the Xia dynasty, China's first dynasty. Although historians question the accuracy of this tale, it establishes an important precedent. Authority should follow merit. The individual deemed worthy of absolute power must possess it fully. This principle would shape Chinese civilization for generations, guiding the establishment of its first dynasty. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia around 1772 BCE, King Hammurabi of Babylon established one of the earliest known legal systems. He commissioned a 7-foot-tall stone stele, 2 feet wide, engraved with 282 laws that every citizen of his kingdom had to follow. Hammurabi enforced strict rules, organizing society into distinct classes, each with different rights and penalties. Nobles held greater value than commoners, who in turn held more than slaves. This clear social hierarchy reflected the principle that equality was not absolute, a concept echoed throughout history. In modern-day Turkey, a lesser-known civilization emerged, the Hittite Empire, under the charismatic rule of Labarnus, 1680 to 1650 BCE. He was a skilled ruler with a singular vision, to unite the Hittite city-states under one rule. Labarnus led his army from city to city, conquering neighboring city-states while forging alliances with their leaders. A master diplomat, he used his skills to win the hearts and minds of the people. Ultimately, Labarnus became the ruler of all Hittite city-states, founding the Hittite Empire. He was just, fair, and beloved, and under his reign, the Hittites flourished and expanded their territory, even bordering Egypt. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, a collection of city-states arose in the European continent. From 1600 to 1100 BCE, Mycenaean Greece dominated the region, forming an elite warrior society centered around palaces. These city-states developed strict political, social, and economic systems, each governed by a king. Unlike the unified Hittite Empire, each city-state was independent, functioning as a self-contained entity with surrounding lands. Cities like Troy, Mycenae, and Pylos flourished, and the earliest remnants of written Greek, known as Linear B, began to appear. Our first record of any Indo-European Greek language. In Egypt, a different kind of social hierarchy emerged, exemplified by the Great Pyramid of Giza. At the base were the farmers and slaves, responsible for manual labor, farming, and food production for the entire nation. After the harvest season, they contributed to monumental construction projects for the pharaohs. Above them were the artisans, including stonemasons, builders, and sculptors, who produced the vast array of art commissioned by the wealthy. Next came the merchants, who navigated the Nile trading gold, papyrus, and linen, earning respect and profit. Following the merchants were the scribes, trained in specialized schools to master ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. They managed food stores, tax records, and even the pharaoh's daily affairs. Soldiers were responsible for protecting the empire, either defending its borders or launching preemptive strikes. Well-fed and disciplined, they were crucial to Egypt's military power. Near the top of the hierarchy were the bureaucrats, high-ranking government officials who managed logistics and administration, including ministers overseeing state affairs. Priests supervised the temples to ensure proper care of the gods, maintaining the spiritual balance of Egyptian civilization. The nobles oversaw specific regions of the empire, maintaining order within their jurisdictions. At the very top sat the pharaoh, the ultimate authority and the intermediary between the gods and humans. It was well known that the pharaoh's will was supreme, and all were expected to obey it. Upon death, the pharaoh was entombed in a pyramid, which was believed to aid his eternal rule over the Egyptian empire. Egyptian society was structured to serve the pharaoh. Taxes were collected from farmers for his benefit. Artisans created unique works for him. Merchants ensured he had all necessary goods. Scribes documented his thoughts. Soldiers protected the empire. And bureaucrats managed tasks the pharaoh could not handle personally, while he sat at the top, communicating with the gods. Ramesses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, accomplished many extraordinary feats within this social system. He coordinated the construction of the Abu Simbel temples, the Ramesseum, and the Karnak temple, while expanding the Egyptian empire and reclaiming territories lost by previous pharaohs, except for lands controlled by the Hittite Empire. The Hittite king Muwatalli II, 1295 to 1272 BCE, became famous for ordering attacks on Egyptian neighbors, similarly to Labarnus's vision of uniting the Hittites under one rule. Ramesses, however, focused on defending Egypt. He recognized that for his empire to succeed, he had to repel attacks. His target was the city of Kadesh. Ramesses led 4 divisions, each of 20 men, prepared for consecutive domination. But the Hittites had prior knowledge of the Egyptian assault through espionage and fortified the city with 4,000 men. The battle was about to begin. Ramesses attempted to divide his forces to force Muwatalli out, but Muwatalli did not take the bait, a critical error. Dividing the Egyptian forces left them exposed and unable to gain an advantage, creating a potential opportunity for the Hittites. Historians believe Muwatalli should have sallied out of Kadesh to trap Ramesses' army near the river, but for unknown reasons he did not. The Battle of Kadesh ultimately ended in a stalemate. Afterward, both sides agreed it was better to cease hostilities and live in peace and unity. Following Muwatalli's death, Hattusili III ascended the Hittite throne. In 1288 BCE, through emissaries, Ramesses II and Hattusili III signed the first known peace treaty in history. establishing mutual non-aggression. Ramesses, the great king of Egypt, shall not attack the land of Hatti to seize its territory, and Hattusili, the great king of Hatti, shall not attack the land of Egypt to seize its territory. This treaty ushered in a period of friendship between two nations that had once been fierce adversaries. The Hittites were skilled in metalworking and taught the Egyptians how to craft advanced weapons and tools. At the same time, the Egyptians, who excelled in agriculture, shared their knowledge with the Hittites. This exchange fostered trade that benefited both civilizations, allowing them to prosper under peace. This arrangement continued until around 2 BCE, when the Hittite Empire fell due to continuous attacks from the Sea Peoples, causing it to vanish into history. In a distant continent, the first civilization in the Americas took root in modern-day Mexico. The Olmec civilization, 1200 to 400 BCE, is often considered the mother culture of the Native American civilizations. Unfortunately, little is known about them, primarily because their hieroglyphic writing remains undeciphered. One of the few remnants we have are the 17 colossal stone heads of Mesoamerica. It is believed that these heads could capture the essence, experiences, and spirit of individuals. While we may not know the names of Olmec leaders as we do for civilizations like Ramesses Egypt or Hammurabi's Babylon, the stone heads still evoke a sense of presence, immortalizing them in history. One day we may uncover their true identities. Meanwhile, in the East, the Zhou dynasty, 1066 to 256 BCE, in China advanced steadily. They gained power due to the failures of the preceding Shang dynasty and embraced the mandate of heaven, which established 4 key principles in Chinese dynastic rule. 1. Heaven grants the emperor the right to rule. 2. Since there is only one heaven, there can be only one emperor at a time. 3. Virtue determines the emperor's right to govern. 4. No dynasty has a permanent right to rule. A ruling family could lose the mandate if they fell out of favor with heaven. Heaven would signal disfavor through droughts, famines, floods, or earthquakes, indicating that the ruler had lost divine blessing. As a result, the Shang dynasty fell, and the Zhou dynasty rose to prominence. The Zhou established a feudal system, creating another social hierarchy. At the bottom were the peasants, tied to the land and responsible for producing crops for the empire. Next were the soldiers, tasked with defending the land from foreign invaders. Above them were the lords, who owned the land and collected taxes from the peasants' harvests. The lords, in turn, gave a portion of their crops to the king, who accumulated wealth and resources. In this system, all labor served the ruling class, while all profits ultimately flowed to the king, centralizing wealth and power at the top. Why would anyone accept a life of farming day after day? There are 2 main reasons for this phenomenon. The first reason is necessity. It took countless people to feed empires and royal families at the time. The second reason is philosophy. Near the end of the Zhou dynasty, the foundations of Eastern philosophy began to emerge. Confucius introduced a system called Confucianism, focused on order and harmony in social relationships. Meanwhile, Lao Tzu developed another philosophy called Taoism, where Tao means the way or the path. Taoism teaches that individuals should align themselves with the natural flow of the universe rather than fight against it. Live peacefully with yourself. Focus on what you can control, and do not worry about external matters beyond your reach. One of the most famous Taoist ideas is the concept of yin and yang, representing interconnected and complementary forces. As time progressed, the city-states of ancient Greece expanded. By around 800 BCE, they realized that much of the land they occupied was infertile, forcing them to import grain. This necessity drove Greek city-states to colonize surrounding regions. At their peak, a city-state like Miletus controlled over 90 colonies across Europe, producing food for the Greeks. Greek settlers established colonies from modern Marseille in France to Rostov-on-Don in Russia. Meanwhile, Rome emerged as a new city-state. According to legend, Romulus and Remus, twin brothers, were abandoned by their father and placed in the Tiber River. A she-wolf rescued them and nurtured them back to health. When they grew up, they sought to establish a city at the place where the wolf had saved them. However, a conflict arose because both brothers wanted the city named after themselves. In the end, Romulus killed Remus and founded Rome in 733 BCE. While Greek city-states were colonizing, Cyrus the Great was preparing to seize an empire. At the time, the Persians were under the rule of the Medes Empire. According to legend, after the birth of Cyrus, King Astyages of the Medes had a vivid dream that his grandson would one day overthrow him. Fearing this, Astyages ordered his chief advisor to kill the child, but the advisor secretly handed him to a shepherd to raise instead. the danger did not end there. At age 10, Cyrus's life was again threatened by Astyages, yet contrary to expectation, he was allowed to live. The greatest mistake of King Aegeus came when Cyrus grew into a man. He gathered his army and rebelled against his grandfather, fulfilling the prophecy. In 550 BCE, Astyages surrendered, yet Cyrus's ambition did not end there. He invaded Babylon and became the supreme ruler of Mesopotamia, even extending his influence to the Indus Valley civilization. He then conquered the Greek colony of Ionia in Asia Minor and built a vast Persian empire, leaving everything for his successor, Darius the Great, to inherit. Meanwhile, in Greece, various city-states began rising to power, but two stood at the forefront: Sparta and Athens. Sparta was a military powerhouse. Spartans believed that everything should revolve around physical strength and war. Newborn Spartan boys were examined, and if a child appeared weak or sickly, he was abandoned. From a young age, boys were taken from their families and subjected to brutal training, including harsh physical conditioning, weapons practice, and surviving extreme living conditions. Spartan life was entirely centered on preparing for war. Spartan society was divided into three main groups. 1. The ruling class, composed of aristocrats who held power. 2. Free non-citizens, who could not participate in governance but were expected to serve in the army. 3. The helots, enslaved people who provided labor for the state. Life in Sparta was harsh, brutal, and militaristic. In contrast, northern neighbors experimented with Athens' democracy, which was highly complex. There were two branches, the Council of 500 and the Assembly. The Council of 500 was selected randomly through a process called sortition. Athens consisted of 10 tribes, each responsible for providing 50 citizens for 1-year service in the council. Every eligible citizen received a unique token, which was used in a device called the Clerotarion, an ancient lottery system. This system randomly selected 50 citizens from each tribe to join the prestigious Council of 500. While serving, each citizen had one vote. To be a citizen, one had to be male, free, and born of Athenian parents. The council set the main agenda for the assembly to vote on, where more than 3,000 people could participate at any time, often creating chaos and disorder. To manage this system, the council appointed 9 presidents on the morning of each meeting. Their role was to ensure all rules and procedures were followed. Since they were appointed before the council convened, it was nearly impossible to bribe them. The council would then vote aloud on whether a proposed law would pass, covering matters such as the appointment of generals, various laws, and other governmental bureaucracy. However, not everyone appreciated Athenian democracy. The famous Greek philosopher Plato considered it barbaric. In Book 6 of the Republic, he wrote that a true navigator must study the seasons, sky, stars, winds, and all relevant subjects to be truly fit to steer the ship. Plato believed it was impossible for a randomly chosen member of the Council of 500 to acquire the necessary skill and knowledge to contribute effectively to society. Instead, Plato advocated the idea of the philosopher king, a man dedicated to study, wisdom, logic, and reasoning, a ruler who devotes his life to understanding justice. Only such a person could lead with true insight. He argued that society could never fully realize its potential, nor solve the problems of states or humanity, until philosophers became rulers, or until those we now call kings and rulers were truly philosophers in both thought and action, uniting political power with wisdom. Yet, there is a problem with Plato's ideal. Every leader believes they are a philosopher king. Everyone thinks their ideas are best, most just, and wisest. This pattern repeats across history, from Minos in ancient China to Libanus in the Hittite Empire, to Siddhartha Gautama in the kingdom of Magadha, India. Around 500 BCE, in the kingdom of Magadha, a pampered prince named Siddhartha Gautama lived a life of absolute luxury in his palace. Everything he desired, jewels, wealth, the finest goods, was within reach. His palace world was like a perfect city on earth, without want or need. But the illusion of perfection ended when he first stepped outside the palace. He encountered the harsh realities of human life, an old man dying in the street before him. Siddhartha realized that the human experience is not perfect or ideal. It inevitably involves suffering and death. Just as Gilgamesh had discovered centuries earlier, mortality and struggle are part of life. Leaving behind wealth and comfort, Siddhartha embarked on a quest for knowledge and enlightenment, understanding that wisdom is not a fixed state, but a continuous process of growth and evolution. Under the fig tree, Siddhartha became known as Buddha, the awakened one. He would spend the rest of his life traveling through the countryside, seeking closeness to enlightenment. Meanwhile, Darius was determined to follow in his father's footsteps and dominate the world. After bringing the Persian rule to the Ionian city-states, the Persians set their sights on Greece. In 490 BCE, Darius led 20,000 men to the city of Marathon, 26.2 miles from Athens. The Athenians, although outnumbered, mustered only 10,000 men, mostly hoplites. As the Persians attempted to regroup, the Greek hoplites crushed the weaker Persian infantry, routing their flanks before they could reach the Persian center. The remaining Persian forces fled to their ships. Early historians estimate 6,400 Persian deaths, compared to just 192 Athenians. A messenger named Phidippides ran 26.2 miles from Marathon to Athens, heralding the Athenians' victory over the mighty Persian Empire. This event inspired the historic First Marathon. But the conflict did not end there. After Darius died under mysterious circumstances, his son, Xerxes I, ascended the throne, seeking to continue his grandfather's legacy. In 480 BCE, Xerxes brought a massive invasion force of over 100,000 soldiers to conquer Greece. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, King Leonidas led 7,000 Spartans in defense. Aware of his army's limitations, Leonidas devised a daring plan to surprise the Persians with a sudden strike on their camp. Though initially successful, the Greeks were eventually overwhelmed by the Persian forces attacking from all sides. Leonidas and his men died bravely, holding their ground to the end. The Greeks later turned the tide at the Battle of Salamis, a naval confrontation between 500 Persian triremes and 300 Greek triremes. Against all odds, the brilliant Athenian general Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis, striking decisively and leaving the enemy no room to maneuver. The Greek victory changed the course of the war. Despite the defeat, the Persian goal of conquering the Greek city-states remained. Xerxes returned to Persia, leaving General Mardonius in charge of the Persian forces to wage what would be their most crucial battle yet. After diplomatic talks broke down, the Persians realized they had no choice but to attack. As Persian forces moved toward Plataea, the Greeks understood the need for unity. 30 different Greek city-states banded together, sending a massive army of 11,000 hoplites with the primary objective of defeating the Persians. Although their numbers paled in comparison to the Persian army, estimated at 150,000, the battle was fierce and relentless. The Greek hoplites fought valiantly against the Persian cavalry and infantry, using the terrain to their advantage. Fighting on a slope helped offset the Persians' numerical superiority. In the end, the Greeks achieved a decisive victory, inflicting heavy casualties and killing the Persian general Mardonius. The Battle of Plataea effectively ended the Greco-Persian Wars and the Persian threat to Greece. Following the Persian Wars, life in ancient Greece entered a golden age of culture. With the threat of war removed, Athens embarked on grand architectural projects, most notably the Parthenon, which crowns the Acropolis and overlooks the city, a testament to Athenian wealth and culture. Even today, the Parthenon remains visible from virtually anywhere in Athens. Around the same time, theatre flourished. The city sponsored the greatest poets and playwrights to create works for the Dionysia festival, dedicated to Dionysus, the Greek god of theatre and fertility. Legendary playwrights like Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Aristophanes emerged during this era. The Greek city-states, however, remained power-hungry. Athens rallied allies into the Delian League, while Sparta formed the Peloponnesian League. Athens aimed to control Corcyra, sparking the beginning of the Peloponnesian War across the Greek peninsula in 434 BCE. This conflict included naval battles such as Sybilla and Paus, and by 421 BCE, a brief peace was negotiated, but it would not last. Athens soon set its sights on Sicily, launching a campaign that initially went well. They forged alliances with several Sicilian cities and won minor skirmishes. However, when the Athenian fleet faced charges of desecrating sacred sites, their greatest naval general, Alcibiades, was recalled to Athens, leaving the fleet leaderless. The campaign began to unravel. The Athenians failed to capture Syracuse, which had fortified its defenses and prepared for a siege. Sicilian forces, reinforced by Sparta, seized the opportunity to strike a decisive blow against Athens. The Athenians suffered from supply shortages and disease, while the Syracusans executed a series of ambushes and surprise attacks, further crippling the Athenian campaign. Finally, after months of grueling combat, the Athenian fleet was utterly destroyed in a decisive battle, resulting in the deaths of thousands of Athenians, while many others were captured and enslaved. A decade later, Athens fell into Spartan hands. The legendary era of Greece had come to an end. Both Athens and Sparta were now far weaker and would never regain the power they once held, leaving the world ripe for a philosopher king to rise and unify it. In the East, the mandate of heaven had ended. The Zhou dynasty, after ruling for 800 years, saw its empire collapse, ushering in a period known as the Warring States, from 474 to 221 BCE. From this turmoil emerged Han Feizi, who created a new philosophy called legalism. Legalists believe that humans are inherently selfish and act only in their self-interest, and the only way to maintain order was through a system of clear and consistently enforced rewards and punishments. Heyzbd argued that the best way to ensure social order was to establish a strong ruler who controlled the law, punished wrongdoers, and maintained absolute authority over the army, economy, and society. Meanwhile, in the heart of Oaxaca, Mexico, the Zapotec civilization flourished. Their capital, Monte Alban, was built atop a mountain overlooking the entire Oaxaca Valley. The city was home to a ruling elite, overseeing a hierarchical society of artisans in the middle class and farmers in the lower class. The Zapotecs were renowned for their innovative agricultural practices, including the cultivation of maize and other crops that sustained their communities during droughts and environmental pressures. They also developed an early writing system, using a combination of pictographs to represent words and ideas, and a sophisticated calendar based on 260-day and 365-day solar cycles. Back in Greece, in 356 BCE, in the city of Pella in Macedonia, the greatest military leader in history was born, Alexander the Great. From a young age, Alexander was groomed to lead. He was the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, but it was his teacher Aristotle who shaped him most profoundly. Known as the father of logic, Aristotle also founded the disciplines of biology and classification by introducing the scientific method, a framework still taught in schools today. He wrote extensively on philosophy, ethics, and art, profoundly influencing the world. By the age of 20, Alexander's father was assassinated, but his exceptional education allowed him to assert control over the rest of the world. In 336 BCE, following his father's death, Alexander was determined to preserve his family's authority and expand his empire. When the Greek city of Thebes decided to revolt, Alexander and his army marched 240 miles in just 14 days. When Thebes refused to surrender, Alexander razed the entire city to the ground, killing 6,000 people and selling the survivors into slavery. The remaining Greek city-states, terrified, allowed Alexander free rein, leaving him with a new target, Persia and its king, Darius III. In 333 BCE, Alexander faced the Persian army at the Battle of Issus. This decisive clash resulted in a defeat for Darius III, forcing him to flee. Alexander then captured several key cities, including the vital port of Tyre, which had resisted his initial siege. In 331 BCE, Alexander confronted Darius again at the Battle of Gaugamela, near the Tigris River in modern-day Iraq. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander achieved a decisive victory through superior tactics and unmatched maneuverability, shattering the Persian army and forcing Darius to flee once more. Alexander continued his campaign, capturing the Persian capital Babylon and controlling most of Mesopotamia. He pressed eastward, winning battles in what is now Iran and Afghanistan. By 330 BCE, he had seized Persepolis, a city of immense wealth and cultural significance. Yet Alexander was not finished. He pushed eastward, crossing the Hindu Kush mountains into India. However, his troops, weary from endless campaigns, refused to advance, forcing him to turn back. After Alexander's failed campaign in the Indian subcontinent, a new power emerged, the Mauryan Empire. At its height, it spanned most of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Its greatest ruler, Ashoka, ascended the throne in 261 BCE. After a bloody war against the kingdom of Kalinga, which caused over 100,000 deaths, Ashoka was filled with remorse. He turned to the teachings of Buddha, embracing non-violence and moral governance. Under Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire flourished, promoting principles such as kindness, respect for all religions, and the abolition of slavery, values that starkly contrasted with Alexander's West, where death in battle was considered honor, the hero's death celebrated, while the common farmer perished anonymously. Alexander died a few years later in Babylon at the age of 32. Throughout his campaign, he had spread Greek ideas, founded by his teacher Aristotle, seeding the Hellenistic culture across the known world, laying the foundations of the Western civilization we recognize today. After Alexander's death, his empire could not sustain itself. His generals vied for power, each claiming authority. But in their battles, the empire crumbled into obscurity. By 323 BCE, after senseless wars, the Greek generals divided the world into three major empires: the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in the east, and the Antigonids in Greece. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals, ruled Egypt, ushering in a period of prosperity and cultural flourishing inspired by his predecessor. He established the Library of Alexandria, a center for scholarship and intellectual exchange, attracting thinkers from around the world. This legacy preserved the works of great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, forming the backbone of Western culture. The Seleucid general, given the keys to Babylon, oversaw a city that had become a cultural melting pot, blending Greek, Persian, Indian, and Central Asian influences. However, the Seleucids favored Greek ideas and language. Under King Antiochus III, 223 to 187 BCE, the Seleucid Empire reached its peak, stretching from modern-day Turkey to Pakistan, becoming one of the largest empires until the rise of Rome. Meanwhile, the Antigonids did not achieve the same level of success. By the time the first Antigonid rulers took power, the Greek world had shrunk to a mere shadow of its former glory. The era of classical Greece had ended, and the Ptolemies, Seleucids, and Antigonids gradually fell under the shadow of the Roman Empire. For Rome to rise, it had to face a formidable rival, Carthage. Both Rome and Carthage sought control over the city-state of Messina in Sicily, which would provide strategic access to dominate the Mediterranean. This tension ignited the First Punic War. After 20 years of fighting, Carthage was defeated in 241 BCE, and the Treaty of Lutatius was signed, but peace was short-lived. In 218 BCE, the Second Punic War began when the Carthaginian general Hannibal invaded Italy with his army, including elephants, to conquer Rome. Hannibal won several early battles, including the famous Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, but he was ultimately defeated by the Roman general Scipio Africanus at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. This war resulted in the total defeat of Carthage, forcing it to cede its territories to Rome and marking the end of the Carthaginian Empire. From this point onward, it was clear that Rome was destined to take control of the Western world. After the end of the Warring States period in the East, Qin Shi Huang and the Qin dynasty rose to absolute power, 221 to 206 BCE. Determined to unify China, Qin divided the empire into 36 commanderies, each overseen by a governor, a military commander, and an imperial inspector. Failure to comply with Qin administration meant severe punishment. The guiding principles were legalism, emphasizing strong governance, strict laws, and the belief that humans are inherently selfish. Despite the harshness, the Qin's control expanded rapidly. After Qin Shi Huang's death, China fell into turmoil until another dynasty emerged. Liu Bang, leader from 206 to 195 BCE, declared himself emperor of the new Han dynasty, after leading a revolution against the Qin. Unlike Qin's strict legalist policies, Liu Bang transformed his empire into a Confucian-inspired paradise, promoting morality, virtue, and righteousness across the realm. Under the Han, a strong dynastic framework was established, and silk production increased steadily, becoming a major source of wealth. In 138 BCE, Emperor Han sent an imperial caravan to connect with Central Asian cultures and the Mediterranean, laying the foundations of the Silk Road. Chinese traders transported silk across Asia to Europe, eventually selling it at high profits. Initially, the journey was relatively short, and in 97 BCE, the envoy Gan Ying was sent to Rome with silk gifts for the emperor. However, he never reached Mesopotamia because the Parthian Empire, the dominant power in Iran, misled him into believing the trip would take years. In reality, the journey could have been much shorter, but the Parthians wanted to maintain their intermediary role, blocking direct contact between China and Rome. This created a system of three contiguous empires: Rome in the west, Parthia in the center, and China in the east. By 86 BCE, Greece, already weakened after Alexander the Great's conquest, became a target for the Roman Empire. General Lucius Cornelius Sulla led legions to Athens, besieged the city for several months, and brutally subjugated its citizens. When Athens fell, Sulla ordered its plunder, destroying many cultural treasures and solidifying Rome's dominance. Athens never regained its former power. Authority had shifted decisively to Rome. In 36 BCE, General Pompey was tasked with conquering Jerusalem and the Galilee region. The Romans quickly seized both cities, bringing Galilee under Roman control, including a small village called Nazareth. But the Romans' desire for expansion did not end in Galilee. In 58 BCE, Julius Caesar was appointed governor of the Roman province of Transalpine Gaul in northern Italy, with a clear mission: to conquer the rest of the Gallic territories. At that time, the Gauls were a collection of Celtic tribes living in what is now France, Belgium and parts of Switzerland, Germany and Italy. Caesar's objective was to assert control over these tribes, while the Aedui, insisting on their independence, rallied under the leadership of Vercingetorix, determined to resist Roman domination. In 52 BCE, as Caesar brought his forces to Alesia, war was imminent. Alesia was heavily fortified, surrounded by double walls, moats, and additional defenses on the surrounding hills. Vercingetorix had gathered a formidable force of Gallic warriors within the city, while Caesar amassed a large Roman army outside its walls. Recognizing the difficulty of a direct assault, Caesar laid siege to the city, starving the Gauls into submission. He ordered the construction of a network of fortifications around Alesia, including an outer wall enclosing the town, and a second wall with a ditch facing outward, preventing any escape attempts. For several weeks, the Romans waged a grueling siege, and both sides suffered heavy losses. The Gallic warriors attempted several desperate breakout attempts, but each was repelled by the Romans. The tide of the battle turned in Caesar's favor when a relief force led by Commius, an ally of Vercingetorix, tried to break the siege. Caesar dispatched a special detachment to intercept the Gallic reinforcements. After fierce fighting, the Romans emerged victorious. With his forces trapped and famine setting in, Vercingetorix surrendered, presenting himself as a prisoner to Caesar, marking the end of Gallic resistance to Roman rule. Over the following 2 years, Caesar conquered the Gallic territories, annexing them into the Roman Empire. The Aedui were executed in Rome, though many were later granted Roman citizenship. However, the Roman Senate was not pleased with Caesar. Despite his massive success, the Senate wanted him to stop. They resented both his growing popularity and the power he wielded. The Senate demanded Caesar resign his command and disband his army, threatening to declare him an enemy of the state if he refused. This left Caesar with a critical choice: either obey the Senate or defy it and ignite a bloody civil war. According to Roman law, no general was allowed to cross the Rubicon River into Italy with a standing army without explicit Senate permission. To do so was considered treason. That small river, unassuming as it seemed, would soon reveal Caesar's intentions and mark the point of no return. The civil war was imminent as Caesar and his army crossed the Rubicon. The battles between Corfinius and Pharsalus had shown the Senate that Caesar was a formidable adversary. The Roman Senate appointed his son-in-law, Gaius Pompey, to lead the Roman forces against him. Both sides recognized the strategic importance of Spain as a link between Italy and the rest of Europe. The armies clashed near the city of Lardus in northeastern Spain. Caesar's forces were significantly outnumbered, but his superior tactics and training secured the advantage. After several days of intense combat, Caesar emerged victorious, forcing Pompey's troops to retreat and declaring himself the new leader of Rome. Upon returning to Rome, crowds hailed him with chants of "Hail Caesar!" The people then declared him dictator for life. Caesar immediately began implementing a series of reforms and policies aimed at improving the lives of ordinary Romans and strengthening central government authority. He ordered the construction of new infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and aqueducts, enhancing connectivity across the city and boosting trade. Caesar also enacted political and social reforms, granting citizenship to many residents of the Roman Empire, establishing new laws and customs based on Roman practices, and promoting the spread of Latin language and culture. Additionally, he introduced the Julian calendar, which serves as the basis for the calendar we use today. However, Caesar's rule was short-lived. In 44 BCE, he was assassinated by 2 senators loyal to him, Cassius and Brutus. With no strong leader to take control, Caesar's 18-year-old heir, Octavian, arrived in Rome to claim his inheritance and assert his political position. Octavian quickly allied with Caesar's loyal lieutenant, Mark Antony, and together they defeated Caesar's killers at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Soon after, tensions arose between Octavian and Antony, as both vied for control of the Roman Empire. In 31 BCE, their forces clashed at the naval battle of Actium, where Octavian emerged decisively victorious. Antony fled to Egypt with Cleopatra, and both committed suicide the following year. With Antony defeated, Octavian became the undisputed ruler of Rome. In 27 BCE, he was formally granted the title Augustus, becoming the first Roman emperor. It became increasingly difficult for the Romans to accept a religiously devoted people who did not worship gods like Mars and Jupiter. So, when the Great Fire of Rome broke out in July 64 CE, Emperor Nero quickly blamed the Christians. The Great Fire destroyed a third of the city, and to cover the enormous costs of rebuilding, Nero imposed heavy taxes across the empire to fund his policies. In response, in 66 CE, a revolt erupted in the holy city of Jerusalem. Initially, the first Jewish revolt succeeded, expelling the unprepared Roman forces and gaining momentum in surrounding villages in Galilee. In reaction, Emperor Nero sent General Vespasian to confront the Jewish forces, pushing most rebels back into Jerusalem itself. By the time Vespasian was declared emperor in 69 CE, the city was under siege. Near Passover in 70 CE, Vespasian and his forces besieged Jerusalem, depleting food and water within the city walls. Internal conflicts among the Jews weakened their defenses, making them vulnerable to attack. By August, the Romans breached the city's fortifications, killing many inhabitants and destroying numerous sacred sites. With the fall of Jerusalem, Roman dominance was firmly established. Later, between 98 and 117 CE, under Emperor Trajan, the Roman Empire expanded to its greatest territorial extent, stretching from present-day Britain to the Persian Gulf. Roman rule prevailed everywhere, except the Americas, which were unknown to them. Meanwhile, in the Andes of modern Peru and Chile, various civilizations thrived. The Moche civilization constructed massive structures like Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, magnificent pyramids that served as religious centers. They developed advanced fertilization techniques using bird droppings as fertilizer, and their centralized government ensured everyone knew their place in society. Further south, the Nazca civilization remained shrouded in mystery. The Nazca people created extensive geoglyphs consisting of hundreds of figures, geometric shapes, animals, and humanoid forms by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-covered stones from the desert surface. These creations, known today as the Nazca lines, still puzzle scholars and remain subject to conspiracy theories regarding their purpose.